Hi there, this is David, and welcome to the worst RPGs released in 2022. This year has just been filled to the brim with RPG release after RPG release, and we've been bathing in an embarrassment of riches all year long, with some absolutely stellar titles coming out one after another. But, as is always the case, with the good, unfortunately, comes the bad. I mean, they can't all be Star Ocean 6s and Xenoblade 3s. Sometimes those clunkers do get through quality control. And that's what I want to focus on here. The 10 absolute worst JRPGs released this year.
Number 10. Soul Hackers 2. Released in August for the PS4, PS5, Xbox, and PC. The original Soul Hackers was released in 1997, but any game developer should know that what worked in 97 probably won't work 25 years later in 2022. Especially if the game was only middling back then. But here we are. And you could be forgiven if you thought that this game was also released back then because drudgery, thy name is Soul Hackers. This is kind of a mix between Persona and SMT. And while there is a bit to do in the towns, 90% of the game is found in the dungeons. But here's the kicker. All the dungeons are the same, and there's really only 3 dungeons in the entire game. You're just sent back to them over and over and over again. And even then, there's nothing interesting in the dungeons. Every single one of them is just some super long, boring corridor that's uninspired to say the least. Granted, they did release a patch recently speeding everything up and streamlining it, but that's way too little and far too late as far as I am concerned. Number 9. Valkyrie Elysium. Released in September for the PS4, PS5, and PC. Dead, drab, boring, empty, and generic. Those are words used in varying reviews to describe this game. It almost feels like Square was developing some generic action RPG, and rather than try to make it unique in some way, they instead just decided to change the main character to a Valkyrie, and then slap this title upon it. Then use the hope and pray method that it would sell on name recognition alone, because really, there aren't any other redeeming qualities to be found here. It has nothing at all to do with the rest of the illustrious series. Turn-based battles, Metroidvania exploration, multiple party members, interesting characterization, and death vignettes, all gone. Towns are nowhere to be had, and there's next to no one in Asgard either. It's just a long, depressing mess. Number 8. Live Alive, released in July for the Nintendo Switch. I never did like this game. I remember being very excited whenever it was first translated for the SNES, and I was playing through it something like 20 years ago. But back then, I thought to myself, oh, no wonder they never released this here. It's a terrible game. It then kind of dawned on me that localization was some sort of quality control back in the 90s. So whenever they gave the green light to re-release this as an HD 2D remaster, I thought that they would actually give us a full-blown remake that it really deserved, but they didn't. They just lazily added a few quality of life improvements and called it a day, rather than fully remaking this and turn it into something really special. I understand that they wanted to capitalize off the success of Octopath Traveler, because this is really the precursor to it, but this was disappointing back in the 90s, and it's just as disappointing today. Number 7. Eiyuden Chronicle Rising, released in May for the PS4, PS5, Xbox, Switch, and PC. Sometimes companies just shoot themselves in the foot with bad business decisions. I'll never understand it. Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes is one of the most anticipated games of next year. But rather than putting their time, employees, money, and effort into polishing that experience, they instead decided to create a whole new side-scrolling action game that really has nothing at all to do with Suikoden, and it looks like it belongs on your cell phone's app store. There is a bit of charm to be had, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if a typical fan stumbled across this, was then completely confused, and then they thought that maybe this was supposed to be 100 Heroes? And then they were just completely turned off by the entire thing. Due to the confusion surrounding all this, they really would have been better off never releasing it at all. Number 6. Monarch, released in February for the PS4, PS5, Switch, and PC. The premise here is actually good. Too bad nothing else is. You're possessed by the power of the 7 deadly sins, and you're trapped in a haunted schoolhouse, and you have to escape with your sister, little girly friend, and sarcastic sidekick. But the execution of it all is just so laughably terrible. It looks and it plays like it's still in beta testing. They really rushed this half-baked product out the door. Not only are the graphics somehow worse than those found on the PS2, but the characters are all insufferably unlikable, and you can't even explore the school that you're trapped in at your own leisure. There's a time limit. Joy. Combat is the only high point, but it's completely separate from exploration, so it's suffering through the worst aspects of Persona and visual novels just to get to maybe 5 minutes of fun. It's a wonder that they were able to put so many wrong decisions into one game. Number 5. Shadow Madness, released in February for the PC. Maybe I'm cheating here, but I don't care. This is the re-release that nobody asked for. This hunk of junk was one of the worst games ever to be released on the original PlayStation, and as such, it should have been lost to the trash can of history. But that wasn't the case. Rather than something deserving getting a PC release, we got this steaming pile. The development team, and I use that term loosely because they were actually localizers, which included Ted Woolsey, used Final Fantasy VII as their base template for this game, but that didn't save it. Instead of playing like a typical RPG, it plays as some sort of unbalanced bastardization of a visual novel and a really shitty RPG. I mean, the gameplay is a joke. Have you ever heard of a JRPG having a level limit of 15 whenever you can reach that within the first 2 hours, despite the entire game lasting roughly 25 hours? I do commend their aplomb, but they really should have hired somebody who knows what they were doing. Number 4. Digimon Survive, released in July for the PS4, Switch, Xbox, and PC. This is Dramamine in game form, consisting of about 90% visual novel stuff, rife with inane anime tropes, boring stills that you investigate with your cell phone, and the least scary horror stuff that I've ever seen. The other 10% is strategy RPG gameplay. Maybe if it was like 50-50, it would be alright, but good lord, there's just not enough. There was actually a lot of hype around this release, especially since the last Digimon game, Cyber Sleuth, was so good. So people expected more, and they were promised horror, and they assumed that along with that would come a mature storyline. But let me tell you, viewers, the only thing resembling horror was the look across my face as I recoiled in terror after seeing just how shockingly bad, boring, and unfun this supposed game was. From the insipid characters, to the never-ending dialogue, to the paper-thin story, I was horrified on Bamco's behalf. Number 3. Various Daylife, released in September for the PS4, Switch, mobile, and PC. What does it mean whenever a game underperforms so badly that it's one of the very few to ever be pulled from the Apple Arcade because of underperformance? And then, what does it mean if just a scant few days after release, it gets reduced to $3 as a bundle deal? Well, more than likely it means that you have a garbage game on your hands. This is a mobile, idle game, just without microtransactions, and everything is just as dull as can be. Combat is bare bones basic, the town is as empty as can be, there's nothing really to explore. It's just, look at the day, see what your multiplier is, and then send your guys out on the job that it corresponds to. That's it. If you want a life sim, then pick up Harvestella, and then leave this randomly generated name game in the dust. Number 2. No Kuni Crossworlds, released in May for mobile and PC. Ni no Kuni 1 and 2 were some of the best games released for the PlayStation in recent years. They were a breath of fresh air and a wonderful new franchise to get behind. Then they left the consoles and jumped onto the telephones. And we all know what happens then. I'll never understand the point of getting a game, not to play it, but for it to instead become a chore. I personally play games to have fun, not to work or to have more stress in my life. I mean, this is just some throwaway, idle piece of garbage that plays itself. All you have to do is hit the quest icon and boom, it does everything for you. You walk to the quest giver, you talk to them, you get the items for them, and you fight the battles for them, all automatically. And isn't the point of something like this for its story? But who's actually paying attention to their phone if it's all done automatically? Number 1, Fragrant Story, released in April for the 3DS. And here we are. We've looked at console games, dived deep into the shitty mobile ones, but this one is so bad that it transcends just being a bad game into actually being a scam. Fragrant Story was marketed as the last RPG to be released on the Nintendo 3DS, and the developer claimed that it was a strategy RPG in the same vein as Final Fantasy Tactics. But little did we know that rather than consisting of some grandiose story filled with multiple levels, job classes, chapters, and a gripping story, that we were instead going to get 3 shitty stages. Yeah, you heard me right. 3. With the entire game lasting no more than 10 minutes. The 8 or so minute review that I did of it pretty much doubled as a Let's Play. I've played Flash browser games more involved in this craptastic pile of crap. Well, that's it for my top 10 worst RPGs of 2022. What RPGs released this year that you absolutely hated? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this video and wanted to hear on the channel, please consider supporting me over on Patreon for exclusive videos and early access to my content, heading on over to Twitch for streaming fun, or coming on over to my Discord to chat and hang out. The links to them all can be found in the video description. This has been David, and if you like this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a good day.